Her mother got passed out. She went on through nursing school, or a nursing course in high school, which got her grades up enough she passed and graduated. She was already a nurse when she graduated. Her first job, she went to Mayo Clinic and was a nurse in Mayo. She could have spent her whole life there. We went recently to visit a friend who started with her as a roommate when they graduated from high school, and she's still there. So they could have been a career forever. She lived there she went there, worked there for a couple of years, liked sunshine, so she went to California. She tried to tell me about her California years, but they're pretty sketchy. She remembers some of it. She had fun on the beaches. And after she got that out of her system, she went back to Illinois, went to nursing school, and got her RN degree. She got a 2-year degree. She doesn't have a 4-year degree or a master's or anything, but with a 2-year degree, she's going on to direct major medical center emergency rooms and all the things she's done in her career. She was working, I think, in Cook County when this happened. If you watched the slides, you probably saw a garage with snow on it and a garage with no roof. That was the day that Nellie decided that God created the South for a reason, and she's going to find out what it was. And that's when she moved to Texas. She moved there and took over as director of an emergency center in Scott and White, a huge medical complex in Waco, or in Temple, Texas. And I'm not sure I think you kind of take over there and the rest of the things she's done. It wasn't a couple of years later I met her, and that's where our adventure started. If I can tell it straight, I'll tell you 2 Nellie stories that you enjoy, and she would tell them on herself. We hadn't been together too long, and I had a motorcycle, a Gold Wing. Tires wore out, so for her birthday, she's going to buy a tire for the motorcycle. She called the motorcycle shop and told him she wanted to buy me a tire for the motorcycle. And he says, "Well, what kind of motorcycle does he have?" She said, "Blue." She's correct, but it didn't quite solve the problem. About 3 years ago, her concealed carry license expired. At that time, you couldn't carry a gun without a license. And when it's expired, you get arrested for that. And she hadn't taken the course yet. She had another couple of weeks till she could get it back. And I noticed one day we're going to the store and her gun's in her purse. I said, "Nellie, you can't carry that with you. You can get arrested for that." She says, "Well, it doesn't have any bullets in it."
She must have been a cupie. Honorary.
And I really don't know much else to tell you. I miss her terribly. I'm glad you all came. And, anyway, thank you for coming.
I wasn't expecting to talk, but I have to fill this in because I actually knew Nellie when she was in Decatur, Illinois. I was raised across the street from her. I have a picture on the day I was brought home from the hospital with Nellie holding me. She was much older than I was. She was about 2 years older than I was. And we were raised across the street. I knew Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds quite well. They had a coal fireplace, and I can remember thinking that was the depths of hell when they were shoveling the coal into that fireplace. Nellie and I played together. I have pictures in a little pool with Nellie. Her mother was kind of old-fashioned and put her hair in those pink sponge curlers, and she had banana curls. And when they weren't really a fashion anymore. But as Nellie and I grew up, we played in each other's basements. We played canasta under my ceiling fan, our attic fan in our hallway and listen to Johnny Mathis hours on end during the summer. We sledded together. As time goes on, we fought and stole each other's boyfriends. Neither one of us were particularly stellar students. We got in trouble a lot. We lived in a neighborhood that we chased fireflies at night. We sat out with all of our neighbors and gossiped. Her mother had the cleanest windows in town because she knew what was going on and was always looking out the windows. It was just an all-American neighbors. Everyone came to my house because we had the first color TV and we watched Danny Thomas together. I Love Lucy. It was really an all-American upbringing. Throughout the years, we would ebb and flow with our friendship and lose contact and come back. And Facebook kind of brought us back together, thankfully. And as Jean and Nellie, lives grew in Rockport. We live in Oklahoma City, so we got to see more of them as they stopped in. Gene had a catastrophe last fall with his eyes, and I was in Tulsa working, and I get a desperate text from Nellie saying, Gene can't see, and we're driving through Oklahoma City. Where's a good emergency room? And so we ended up giving them directions to an emergency room. We got to have dinner with them. It turned into something overall relatively minor. And we got to spend some time with them that evening, and they went on about their way. And then soon thereafter, Nellie became ill. It is a huge loss in my life. We had much unfinished business. We had plans, as many as you had. I will miss her. I had anticipated arguing with her over politics in the nursing home. I had thought we would grow old together. I know it's a great loss for you all, as it is for me. I hope you will cherish your lives and go forth with gratitude. I have a mug in my closet that my stepdaughter had actually picked out this fall and said, oh, I had seen on Facebook your friend Nellie's word for this year was gratitude. You need to get this for her and give this to her the next time. Sadly, I've never been able to give this to her. So I'm going to get it out tomorrow morning when I get home and use it and think about Nellie. So go forth and live with gratitude and think of Nellie. I will. Thank you.
First time I met Nellie Simgrunder, it was kind of an odd situation. I was on the board of what was then known as the Alliance for the Status of Women. And we were having a board meeting, and the then executive director, Carrie McBee, shows up with Nellie Simgrunder, who was unknown to me at that point, and that was about 15 years ago. And Carrie was showing up. Carrie lived in Harrisburg and Nellie in Sturgeon, and Nellie had just moved to town, apparently, and was lonely and wanted to get involved. And Carrie showed up because she wanted to proposed that she be installed on the board. And the board, as you might imagine, those of you who have any experience on boards of nonprofits, was appalled at the lack of decorum and process. Our reaction was sort of, who is this woman? This is not the shelter for wayward and lonely Texans. You know, we run a professional operation here, and there are ways of doing things, ways of adding people on the board. Well, I am so eternally grateful that on that occasion, process began, and we voted Nellie onto the board. And that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. She and I became not only fellow board members, but friends. And her, I don't know if it was her first publication, I don't know whether she published anything during nursing school, but through that time on the board, she was the co-author of this publication, an indicator's report on the status of women in Missouri. And she was very proud of this publication, as she should be. She worked very, very hard on the publication, and much harder than I did, frankly, truth be told. And she worked on getting the word out about the status of women after it was published, going to legislators, giving talks, etc., etc. That was Nellie, right? It was not, she didn't do anything halfway. It was all in when she made a commitment to something. And that was one of the many things I admired about Nellie. I later on was enormously privileged to be her coach. And I'm gonna, I know she wouldn't mind me sharing that I was her coach because she was public about it and wrote about it later. And she asked me to be her coach to help her get a life here. Well, that was ironic, right? She ended up with a bigger life than I have here. More friends, right? She has, one of the things that she did, and I don't remember whether she did it while we were coaching, but I remember her coming to me and telling me the story of going to the Columbia Chamber of Commerce, to the Governmental Affairs Committee, and advocating for passions. Now, those of you who aren't from Columbia might appreciate, I mean, many of us are progressive here in Columbia, and many of us are not progressive here in Columbia. And the governmental affairs